prior to Governor Kemp coming in, and they left us in good hands with Lee Wright and Melissa and Will and the team, and can't tell you how much we appreciate that as we head into really an exciting new administration with Governor Kemp. And we've had the opportunity, I want to thank Greg Dozier and Lori Smith as they're putting the team together, and they've attached our staff people, Ryan Loke and Cody Whitlock, and they've already rolled up their sleeves and helped dig into the budget. I had an opportunity to talk with a commissioner from another state where they haven't had such a smooth transition and such a continued commitment to the work that we do. And that's evident here in Georgia. And Chairman Hill and Chairman England, I particularly want to thank you and your staff and your team members who haven't missed a beat in helping us to prepare. They support us, they believe in us, they ask us hard questions that challenge us, but I think it really helps us to bring a better budget proposal to you, and we're very pleased about that. So it's nice to feel like we're all in this together. So with that, I'd like to dive into the DBHDD budget and give you a few quick summaries. I think most of you will be familiar with some of the language I'm going to use here at the start, which is just to tell you about the things you have provided extensive support to us for in recent budget years. This is waivers for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, behavioral health crisis centers in communities throughout the state, supported housing for people with serious and persistent mental illness, and I think y'all are aware of the Children and Adolescent Mental Health Commission, which really has been a great infusion of new services and new dollars into a much needed area. So what you'll see in the budget coming forward is a continued commitment to these issue areas, but we also have some other new items to share with you that help to undergird and support the work that we're doing. Okay, next slide. So, as I've often done in the budget presentations, I've had to take a moment to remind you about State of Georgia's settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. This has been a big driver for many of the budget items you all have supported over the years. Just to remind you, in 2010, then Governor Perdue signed a settlement agreement on behalf of the state of Georgia, and we committed to a variety of improvements that were needed. In 2015, it was acknowledged that we had completed most of the items in the settlement agreement. But in 2016, there was also an acknowledgement that there were 3 areas where there were still targets to be met. And so we signed an extension agreement, and you see those 3 target areas here. There were still individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who were in our hospital who had the ability, with the right providers and supports, to move to the community. We still had greater need for ongoing housing supports for people with serious mental illness, and for individuals that are at times extremely fragile and vulnerable, we needed to enhance the level of oversight that was available in the community. We have continued to make progress since 2016 in each one of those areas. Over the course of the entire agreement, you all have supported DBHDD and this movement from hospital-based services to community-based services with over $260 million of support. And we have put that to work in a variety of ways. I'd love to have the opportunity to keep telling you about this buildup of the community, of our community system for people with mental health issues and intellectual and developmental disabilities. But today, I want to give you one quick status update on this agreement because it's vital for the state, it's vital to the department. You should know that before Governor Deal left office, he sent a very important and robust letter over to the Department of Justice outlining why the state of Georgia believes that we are in substantial compliance with the agreement. And he requested a sit-down with the Department of Justice and the state of Georgia for us to say, we intend to continue the good work. We do not need federal oversight. And I think you all have demonstrated your commitment. The department and its providers have continued to demonstrate this is the right work. It's the work we want to do. We do not need federal oversight. The little asterisk to the story right now is, unfortunately, we are a victim of the shutdown because Governor Deal sent his letter right before the shutdown ensued, and so we do not have a response yet from the Department of Justice. I do want to let you know this morning, I am very optimistic. I think your continued commitment to DBHDD's budget, our continued work, the partnership with the providers is going to allow us to keep, move, and grow and expand and enhance our system, and we will continue to contend that we do not need federal oversight. So please stay tuned. I wish I had more to tell you, but I hope that you feel our enthusiasm and how appreciative we are of your ongoing commitment that has allowed us to make the progress that we have. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot to just give you some context and give you a reminder of the DBHDD budget. We have a large and complex budget, and so I find the quickest way to give you a snapshot overview of the budget so we can talk about our requests for this year is to show you 3 different pictures of the budget. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm just going to show you the 3 pictures. First one is one that is a reflection of the investment that we've made since the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. What the state was sued for was you have too many people in your hospitals that cannot move to the community because your community-based system is not robust and comprehensive enough. The yellow line that you see here, you can't quite see the dollar numbers probably, but what I hope you can see is the trajectory of your continued investment in what we do. We have built community services, especially for those at the highest level of need throughout communities in the state. And that yellow line is a reflection. I want to make one other comment about the red line. The red line represents our hospital budget, and these are all state funds here. But it's important to note, we do still have 5 state hospitals in the state of Georgia, and it's critical that the quality of care that we deliver in those hospitals remain at levels that exceed standards. That's our expectation. So what you'll continue to see, we hope, is this investment in community, but a continuation of the importance of quality services in our hospital system. So that shows you our trend line. The next snapshot, this is just the simplest matrix of the DBHDD budget. Why I like to show you this one is because it does, once again, a differentiation between community services and hospital services. You already saw that we have more money in community services. It also shows you the distinction between state and federal dollars. And you will see that the majority, a larger portion of our funds come from you all and from the commitment the state of Georgia is making to having a high quality behavioral health and developmental disabilities service delivery system. Final point that I want to make on this slide is just that administration is a small portion of our very large budget, and that's an important point of pride for us, that in a large budget, 3% of that budget is dedicated to the administration of this large, complex service delivery system. So that's the second snapshot. Let me quickly show you the third. What this snapshot is it shows you all the specific program areas of disabilities that DBHDD and its provider network serves. I like to show you this one because a lot of you have been champions of particular areas and you have an interest in particular areas of the service delivery continuum. So I'd like you to see both how that's funded, whether it's state or community, or you can also see what our collective investment is in each of those areas. So I won't go into any of that in detail, but do like you to have that snapshot of the ways in which you can look at our budget. Okay. With that, I'd like to talk about, I hope that context is helpful to move into where we're headed with the amended 19 and the fiscal year 20 budget. So these priorities listed here will sound mostly familiar to you, but we have 1 or 2 new items that we'll introduce. They've always been a part of our service delivery system, but now you'll see them reflected a little bit differently in our budget. So what you can see there is the first item, which is really our vision and our mission, ensuring for the people of Georgia easy access to high quality care, particularly in our public safety net. We have crisis services, which many of you are interested in, and I'm going to talk a little more detail about that. The DD waivers, we'll say a little more about our budget there. And the addictive diseases residential beds. So this is a new enhancement that we haven't talked to, and we're going to enhance and expand the amount that we have there. I think for all of you that will make sense. If you think about what's happening in the state and the need to treat addiction, that will make sense. We're going to continue to ask for additional funds for supported housing for people with serious mental illness. I've talked to you before about forensic services, and just to be clear, forensic services are those that DBHDD provides for essentially for people who are involved with the court system. And they are generally under the jurisdiction of state and superior courts, and we provide an array of services to that population, both in our hospitals and in our community. So I'll tell you a little more about what we're hoping to expand there. And then finally, this term is a term we talk about, core services, and you see what we mean by that. This is just primary outpatient behavioral health care. What I'd like you to start thinking with us about is that behavioral health care, which is mental health and substance abuse, is like any other health care. We are trying as best we can to serve people at the earliest point that they need help. As you all have invested significantly in crisis services over the course of time, many of you have said, do we have to keep serving people in those expensive and at times really difficult and intensive service delivery elements, which is at the deepest end of care? For many years, we've been talking about the need to really make our core basic outpatient mental health services more accessible. And I'm going to show you how that's, we really hope to enhance that in our budget this year, as in the hope that that's going to offset some of the need for hospital and crisis services. So that's a preview. All right. I think for those of you, let me just direct you, if you all are following along in your governor's budget book, our budget items are covered page 103 through 113. We're not going to go line by line. We regroup it into categories that I hope will make it easier for you to understand, but obviously don't hesitate, you'll ask me as needed. But we've grouped these together so that we could talk about them in a way, hopefully, that makes common sense. This first slide, which shows an amended FY19 adjustment as well as the 20 adjustments. This, I hope, looks familiar to all of you because I assume many agencies are coming. These are the administrative changes that really go across all agencies, and they're pretty familiar categories to all of you. With your permission, I won't spend much time on that, and I'll just move to things that are really more specific to DBHDD and the service delivery system. These do not have an impact on service delivery to the people in our state. So I'd really like to move to what really essentially is annualizations that we want to talk about, and then budget increases that we're eager to tell you about where we're headed. Okay, so this first slide, the annualizations, these are annualizations of items that y'all supported in fiscal year 19. The first one is annualization of behavioral health crisis center funding. I think that many of you have become very familiar with what a behavioral health crisis center is because you've asked for them, where they are operating in different communities. They are highly utilized. They are churning actively with people who are in psychiatric crisis or need detox and need a place that they can be dropped off in their local community. The idea is that these help us to avoid hospitalization. It is our most intensive level of crisis service in the community, and they've been very successful. So with these funds, we are annualizing, these funds are for the Behavioral Health Crisis Center that is in Gainesville, Georgia. Avita is the provider of that. The money goes to our local providers, usually our community service boards, and that's going to fund the Avita, which was the Gainesville area, was shown as our greatest area of need. In addition, some of these funds are targeted towards Highland Rivers, which is up in the northwest corner of the state. And I want to say a word just about bricks and mortar. And a behavioral health crisis center is an actual physical place. It's a center, it's bricks and mortar. We've begun to talk to you all about that as a $7.1 million entity that provides really excellent and needed crisis services in your community. But one of the other things we've learned after having built these behavioral health crisis centers for a few years and having much more comprehensive and robust data and the ability to evaluate what's happening, it doesn't always take a $7.1 million physical bricks and mortar structure to address some of the crisis needs in every community. So, as I said, part of this money will go to an actual structure. Another part of the funds will support what Highland Rivers is doing. They have 72 beds spread throughout their catchment area, but additional funds will help to improve the staffing that's there. It will help place individuals in an emergency department where folks have landed so that we can divert people from going into a hospital or a place that they don't need to go. So we're learning lots of other creative ways to build out the crisis system, and that's really critical so that we don't always think we have to come to you and ask for a $7.1 million entity, although we will keep asking for those. But we are learning a lot of other ways that we can really help get folks to the level of care that they need more quickly. So we've got both of those investments there. The second item you see here is the annualization of 125 waivers. Again, these are individuals who entered IDD waiver services, and now this is the annualization of their service delivery in the waivers right now. Over the last several years, you all have continued. This was part of the settlement agreement, and also part of what we do is move individuals. The waivers go to people who are either in the hospital, and we can develop a provider setting that can serve them in the community, or they might come off of our planning list. And let me say a word about the IDD planning list, because many of you are familiar with this. So every year, we add people to the community waiver through the funds that you give us. We add more than the number of waivers that you give us, because we have an ability to keep moving people into service. However, a planning list does exist. And 2 years ago, you all asked us to take a look at that planning list, which at that time was over 8,000 individuals who were awaiting some kind of IDD services. And we did a report to all of you, which was a great challenge for us and a great opportunity for us to say what's happening in this state and what do we want to do. As it stands right now, there are just under 6,000 people on that planning list. One of the things you charged us with doing was looking at that list. What we found, there were many names of individuals on the list who really were no longer in need of services. They might have left the state. They might not need services anymore. So now we're working with a real list of individuals that is prioritized by need. And it used to be one of the other changes that we made. We used to give out the waivers regionally. We centralized that so that the next most in need person in the state is the next person who will get the waiver regardless of location. So we're constantly looking at how can we move more people into community-based services. And again, we put forward a 5-year plan that we'd love to pull back up and talk to you about what would the investment be if the state wanted to move more aggressively toward reducing the number of people on the IDD waiting list. I should say, people can receive services while they're on the list. But the list really is the ordering of when you would access a waiver. And then finally, the third item here is the annualization of one of the items that came out in Governor Deal's Children's Mental Health Commission, where y'all started the funding last year, and that's for supported employment and really supported education as well for 500 youth that have serious and emotional disturbance. And with the right supports and services, they can access employment and education in the community. So those funds are underway. Okay, the next 2 slides are going to be really a reflection of our priorities, our recommendations to you about the best way to make progress going forward. On this first slide, the first 3 items probably are generally familiar. I'm going to spend a little more time on the second 3 since those are new to our budget conversation. FMAP rate change, you all may be aware that's a federal formula that changes every year. You either add money to our budget or take money out of our budget. It has no impact on services. You just keep that whole for us each year. So you can see in 2020 there's an addition to our budget. It doesn't have an impact on our service delivery. You'll see again, we're asking for 125 now in comp waivers. This is the first 6 months of funding. It allows us to keep moving individuals either from the hospital or the planning list into an appropriate community-based setting. So you have the first 6 months of funding there in 2020. And then finally, the third item is another basically administrative offset and revenue. As we move individuals out of our hospitals and into the community, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, the Medicaid revenue goes down. And as you might expect, fixed costs of the hospital remain. So for the first time, those funds now are being put into our amended and our fiscal year 20 budget to recognize that we need to still deliver quality of care in our hospitals, but you're replacing the loss of the Medicaid for individuals who are now being served in the community. Okay. The next three items, the Administrative Services Organization. And many of you are familiar with our partner, Beacon, who has been our partner as an ASO since we began this long-term contractual commitment several years ago. At the time when we first came into the department, there were a number of different contracts that helped to support the administration of our service delivery system, right? There are just like any healthcare delivery system, you have to pay claims, you have to manage quality and utilization, and you usually do that through a third party. When we first came in, state of Georgia was actually doing that through 4 separate vendors. And y'all challenged us to say, why don't we put that all together? And we did a large-scale RFP, and after a very competitive process, we landed with a single administrative services organization with the intent of streamlining and advancing the efficiency and effectiveness of our service delivery system and really coordinating behavioral health and intellectual and developmental disability service delivery system, data collection, and quality management across the board. Just like every area of healthcare, if you're not collecting data and demonstrating outcomes, you're not going to be viable in the future. So this building over several years in partnership with Beacon is what really allows us to make a commitment to all of you that we have an accountable and transparent healthcare delivery system. And so for the first time, this has been funded, and again, this has been in cooperation with OPB, that over the course of several years, the phased-in implementation of this partnership, of this administrative infrastructure, would play out the way that it did, and we knew that in 19 and 20, the increase in the functionality of this administrative services organization would be such that we would require additional funds. Again, it is to make our delivery system accountable, reliable, and to bring you data about how services are being delivered. So you see additions there for 19 and 20. So I mentioned to you core behavioral health services. If you recall, for those of you that have been here over the years, as you have enhanced our service system through the ADA settlement agreement, all of those services and supports basically have been at the deep end and the most intensive end of our service delivery system. If you keep building crisis, and we needed to build crisis, but if all you do is keep building your crisis and deepest end of the system, really you're not making the best investment in long-term access to regular outpatient behavioral health care. So we've seen a burgeoning use in crisis services. What we want to incentivize is easier access to, at the first moment someone thinks they need care, how can we make sure they quickly can get into outpatient services? That system right now is capped. The funding that we have for outpatient service delivery is in a fee-for-service system, and it's capped. So the $10 million request you see here is the first attempt to acknowledge that we can improve access, we can improve quality, and we can make sure folks get to what they need sooner in their community. And really the hope is that in the end, we offset some of the need for crisis services. So that's our request there. The Georgia Apex program, really happy to hear how folks have really come to understand the need for the availability of mental health services in our schools. 3 years ago, we developed the Apex program as a pilot. What's really neat about the Apex program is that it engenders a partnership between the local mental health provider and the school system and other local stakeholders. Where Apex programs already exist, there is a partnership, and how this plays out in what school they're in is decided at the local level. The Apex funding basically is seed money that allows them to begin having counselors and other services right in the school setting. This solves some of our transportation problems. It serves kids where they are. 10 years ago, schools did not want to have mental health and behavioral health services in their school. Now we've got every county asking, where's our Apex program? So this is a really exciting advancement of the availability of services for kids. The best thing about it is that once you plant the seed money, they get services delivered over the course of time. The goal is that those services are actually billable services. We can bill Medicaid, and the program becomes self-sustaining. So it's not a grant that's going to require your money every year. The goal is that a majority try to get to a 70% threshold of all the services that are delivered. If they can bill those, they can keep sustaining. So what we're really, the investment is around seed money to make that possible all around the state. Governor Kemp has made it a point to talk about his interest in this, and we're really excited. We have a lot of good data to show positive impact in the schools. Okay. Next item, and again, more of our priorities. Some of these reflect things you've heard from us. So we talked about the need for those core outpatient behavioral health services, but we are going to keep asking you for crisis dollars because there are certain areas of the state that are not built out yet with sufficient crisis services. And so what you see here is adding on to. In many cases, in your communities and locations around the state, we have crisis stabilization units. They might need more beds, they might need more staffing, they might need enhancements to make those more effective. Again, it's not always about building another new one, it's about really increasing what we can do with the ones that we have. The AD residential beds. Currently, the state has 176 beds. As you all well know, the need for long-term addiction services is critical throughout our state, and these funds will allow us to add 144 residential beds for people with addiction throughout the state. I should say a word, y'all are familiar with opioid dollars that have come from the federal government that is completely separate from this. Those have strings attached that require certain service delivery. This is really above and beyond, and I think is really going to help us to make a significant impact in the need for addiction services. The mental health supportive housing vouchers, again, continuation of folks are much more likely to achieve recovery in their mental health treatment if they have housing and supports and a place to live while they're doing that. Final 3 items are for our forensic services. Many of you have become very familiar with the intersection of people with mental illness and the criminal justice and law enforcement system. Every state in the nation is struggling with the impact of individuals that are cycling in jails and in prisons, and we need more service support to evaluate, provide treatment, both in our hospitals and in our communities. So you see 3 requests here. We need coordinators that can actually provide case management services on the ground. We need evaluators who can assess whether individuals are competent to stand trial. And the forensic integration home, we have several of these throughout the state, where individuals, once approved by the court and by DBHDD, that they are able to live in a supervised setting in the community. They live in a supervised group home, they go to work, and they begin their transition back into the community. It's been a very successful model, so we're seeking 1 more of those community integration homes. Okay. My last 2 slides are just leaving you, as we always do, with a preview of challenges and opportunities that still face us. And then I'll be happy to take any questions, but do want to let you know what remains ahead for us. You can see that the core funding issue and the basic outpatient services, we want to keep talking about that and how that can offset the need for crisis services. We will want to continue to expand supported housing for people with serious mental illness. We will continue to ask you for additional funds as you keep asking us, how can we get our crisis units in our community? And we're really taking a close eye to the data and where people and where those needs exist. As mentioned, we do have a multi-year plan for how to address the planning list for intellectual and developmental disabilities. We'd love to keep talking to you about that. You hear and we hear about the importance of looking at the adequacy of provider rates. We're always open to that conversation, and I know you are as well, as you hear from your constituents. And then finally, we'll continue to build services for individuals with addictive diseases and forensic services here and in every other state. This is a really growing and emerging concern, and we want to keep talking about how do we build a continuum of services that can be responsive to the need. And I would be remiss if I did not tell you, last but absolutely not least, the workforce challenges that we face in behavioral health and intellectual and developmental disabilities, from frontline workers in our hospital to nurses to psychiatrists and all the way across the board, is probably the biggest challenge that we face. I could go on, but I have a feeling you may have questions for me if there's time.
Oh, we got questions. We got questions. I'm writing numbers down. All right, Chairman Setzler.
Oh, thank you.
Try the mic right beside of you. We've got a few dead ones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for your presentation. I want to ask you about 2 different settings. One is a concern, and one is maybe a request for even more of the same. Looking at your look-ahead slide, it's items 6 and 5. I'll take those in reverse order. First one being the addictive disease capacity. And you're talking about the different residential settings. I was at a community event about a year ago. It's been less than a year, that someone actually came up to me who was on the backside of recovery from addiction, and said, Representative Setzler, do you have any time? And I said, sure. So we talked for probably 20 minutes. And he talked about his grave concerns about the actual value of services at these sober living homes. And he talked about friends of his that are in that setting and how unsuccessful they had been. He sort of walked me through some specific things that would make your ears burn. And they talked about the great service he got in more of a group home setting that really turned the corner for him and allowed him to be really kind of crest the peak of recovery. I do have another question for you, but I've got grave concerns about the real value of the sober living home model. And are there any things you could give us that we're trying to fix? I know it's a nationwide issue, but how can we do better?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think it's not a surprise to me that people have varying opinions about the variability of services across the board. DBHDD does not license or fund the sober living homes. So that is not directly a part of our continuum. And in fact, the residential beds you see here are our commitment to providing evidence-based services in a licensed setting that we would have oversight of. So like you, I know people who've had good experiences and bad experiences in sober living, but that is not a part of the continuum that you're investing in.
Okay, because Commissioner, I took that and I went to some professionals. I didn't just take one person's word on it.
Yeah.
I did some more research, and everything I see is confirmed. So that's more the rule than the exception. I do have another question for you, but very briefly, where are those sober living homes funded? What funding source do those have if it's not your AD services? It's
my understanding that most of them are private pay.
Okay. So, second question, if I could, Mr. Chairman, on the DD side of the house, I've had some great experiences with the host homes we've got out there,
Right.
smaller settings. Mm-hmm. But my concern is continually that the dollars work their way down to the point of delivery, that the host homes have the dollars at point of delivery so that our population can really get the services they need. How would we stand if we benchmark ourselves across the country versus best practice? How do we stand in terms of the dollars working their way down to those host homes and not being siphoned off by the various levels between you and service delivery?
I don't have a good answer for where we stand compared to other states. Some of the rules and regulations around this vary by state. If you remember, our settlement agreement, the Department of Justice requires when folks go into group home settings that it has to be a 4-bed setting. That isn't true in every other state. So it's difficult to compare
Sure.
apples to apples on the pure how is the money working directly. I can tell you we share absolutely that commitment that the dollars need to go to where the service happens. And we have great oversight of that with our provider community, and we share that interest and concern that in a host home setting, the same thing can happen.
Okay, I may follow up with you, Commissioner, to delve into that some more, but appreciate your presentation today.
Yeah, and just Mary, our CFO, just reminded me about we've got a mandate that 60% of the funds have to go direct. So there is some eyesight towards exactly what you're saying, which is how can we make sure there is some rigor around the funding.
Representative Gardner.
I think it's working. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner Fitzgerald, for the work that you've done to bring our mental health system closer to the 21st century treatment. And particularly the core services that you described, a very ambitious ask. We know it is desperately needed all over our state. You also know that I'm particularly interested in Fulton County and appreciate very much the work that you have done to make some coordination between Fulton County and the state DBHD department work together in a more collaborative way. My question has to do with the core services in Fulton County. We have 1 million people and are the county without a CSB, so that makes the coordination with core services more difficult. And I'm interested in your plan to be able to bring those core services to the 1 million people in Fulton County who need the same kind of services that everybody else in the state does. I really appreciate how much you have made both core services and housing a priority so that we can have the community services we need. But without a CSB, it makes it a little more complicated in Fulton. We're making progress, but I'd like a little update on that.
Sure. Thank you, Representative Gardner, and we appreciate your support and your long-term interest in the issue. Every county across the state has needs, and it's hard to believe what I'm going to tell you next, but this is a critical part of the core services issue. After this unbelievable infusion of support that you have given us over the last decade, which really has gone to the deep end of our service delivery system, Georgia is still ranked about 45th in per capita funding for mental health services. So every county will come and make a plea to me about needs that they have, and Fulton is no different. And Fulton does have an intensity and certainly has a real important and critical partner in Grady, who we've invested heavily in as a partner and really is providing essential safety net services. So I think what our desire is to be able to, for all of you and each of you, as you look at your areas and try to determine what you need, and Fulton, it's true for Fulton, we now have the ability, the Administrative Services Organization gives us the ability to have data about where people are receiving service delivery, where there are gaps in our system, so that we can come back to all of you and say, here's how it looks to us, here's inequities that exist, and here's how we believe we'd like to resolve them. So our commitment is to be able to do that and to use data that is far better and more comprehensive than we used to have in order to make a commitment around what we want our public safety net to be in Georgia. So we commit to being open and transparent with you about where the needs are and where we'd like to deploy the dollars that you hopefully will support us with.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question, and I know several of you have got your mics queued wanting to ask some stuff, but we do have the governor coming at 12. We have 2 other presenters between now and then. So I'm just going to ask you if you would circle up with the commissioner. She's always glad to answer questions and hear your concerns outside of this setting as well. And for our last question today, Senator Underman.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I had 3 different questions right here. Thank you for your service. Number 1 is the state is presenting and preparing their Families First Prevention Act along with DFACS. And I was wondering, with that drawdown money that's anticipated, will it go into the core behavioral health services, or will it go into the Georgia APEX program? I wasn't sure what the intention, and have you published any of your recommendations for that plan? The second question is on page 107, the transfer and deletion of dollars, $790,000 for the opioid abuse. I was just wondering, what are your plans for the RCOs, and what money do you have recommended, and are you going to have additional programs? I think there's right now 15 programs. Are you going to have additional money? And then the third question is about the methadone clinics. Is Medicaid paying for the Vivitrol and the more expensive drugs, or are you going to stick to the methadone?
Okay, let me answer them in a couple of different ways. First, let me go to the RCOs, because I want to take the opportunity to thank you for your leadership, Senator Underman. Those exist because you helped to champion that beyond just treatment, and this is really important to hear, treatment is only one aspect. The RCOs are recovery communities that are led by peers who have been through it, and we are going to continue our commitment to the RCOs throughout the state. The transfer that you mentioned, and we didn't give you the transfers on a slide, but that's budget neutral, so there's no impact there, if that's what your question was. Do you want to come back to the DFACS? Because the core, we do not have the intent, we have not published the plan for how the core services would be used. We have a lot of ideas about that and some data that's driving how we look at it. Be very happy to be transparent with you all about how we're looking at that. Those dollars are not, we're not allocating those either into APEX or Children's Services. We are talking closely with DFACS about the implementation of Prevention First. This is really, really critical, but there are very specific parameters around evidence-based services and how do you achieve the threshold there. So the most important thing we think we can do is work closely with Director Rawlings as they really begin the planning for what really we think is an overhaul of that system. We're happy to be a partner in it. I think I can't answer your question right now, but we'll be happy to.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members, I can't tell you how much we appreciate the hard questions, but more than anything, the support and the interest in what's having a real impact on our state. I can't thank you enough for your ongoing support.
Absolutely. Commissioner Pat Wilson is next up, Department of Economic Development.
Okay.
Or you want, oh, you got a clicker? Yeah, perfect, we can do that.
I'm good. Yeah. How you doing?
Well, good morning, Commissioner. The podium and microphone is yours, and we're thinking that you're going to announce that you got somebody bringing another 150, 200,000 jobs that'll be announced this week. So,
Chairman, thank you.
And my vice chair says in Turner County. So
What was that?
I say my vice chair says in Turner County. So
Whatever I can do. Whatever I can do. Good morning, everybody. And Happy New Year. As I told somebody, I'm going to keep saying that until I've said it to pretty much everybody I know. So this has been a great year for economic development in Georgia, and y'all know that. Really has been across the state. We've seen a wide and diverse group of companies that have come to Georgia over the last year. And in our budget, we didn't really have any major changes, so the budget staff asked that I focus on some of the wins from last year and highlight what we do, because we do have a lot of new members this year. So I'm going to start by reminding everybody, because I'm going to say this over and over and over, that we are the #1 state for business for the 6th year in a row by Site Selection Magazine. So that starts with me saying thanks to all of you, because we're not the #1 state for business without the legislature and the great business environment that you all have created over the years. So I want to say thanks for that. So for those of you who have not, who aren't as versed in economic development, we have multiple divisions within the agency. Global Commerce, which is business recruitment. International Trade, which is helping Georgia companies sell overseas. International Relations, which deals with, of course, all of our consuls general here in Georgia, as well as our delegations that come and visit. Our Rural Georgia initiatives, which was new this year and the legislature created last year. Centers of Innovation, our tourism division, film, and the arts. So all those different divisions, we look at economic development holistically. It truly is an integrated approach to economic development. Not every community is going to be able to land a Caterpillar, but there is something that creates jobs in every community in this state. And so we want to highlight all of those different divisions in the way that they work together. So you all probably have our year in review, which I believe we put out last week. It's a notebook this year, so you can very easily find statistics that you can use in your speeches when you're back home. But I'm going to highlight some of the successes of each one of the divisions. So in FY18, our Global Commerce division was very successful. 419 projects, creating 27,363 new jobs with $5.5 billion of investment. That is pretty amazing. So I wanted to, and before I get too far into it, I wanted to highlight this map. This shows where every one of our divisions worked last year. That's 159 counties that were covered last year by at least one of our divisions. And so whether it's trade or whether it's the Council for the Arts giving arts grants, our vibrant communities, or whether it's locating companies, our department has worked in every county in this state over the last year. 78% of our projects that we announced in Global Commerce were outside of the Metro Atlanta region. So what's fascinating is we've had an extremely busy end of last year and beginning of this year. We have had 176 new projects located in FY19, 17,000, nearly 18,000 jobs announced, and $4.82 billion of investment. That's just FY19. So to break these numbers down a little further, since Amazon told us that they were not coming, which is November the 13th, My birthday, by the way. It was not my favorite birthday. Since they told us that they weren't coming to Georgia, we have announced 55 locations, $2.83 billion of investment, and 7,130 jobs. Now, Amazon was only committing to 5,000 jobs a year for 10 years. Since that announcement, we've announced 7,130 jobs, so which is pretty amazing. The great thing about that is it's diverse. Those jobs come in practically every sector of employment, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's headquarters, whether it's logistics. They cover the entire spectrum of employment in the state, and they cover the entire state. So we're really excited about what's going on with our global commerce team. International trade. One of Georgia's true economic development assets is our global accessibility. And then this goes back to this legislature as well. You all have continued to invest in the port. You've continued to invest in our roads. You've continued to invest in our transportation network. We are unmatched in our accessibility around the world. The value of Georgia exports reached $37.2 billion last year, which is a 4% increase over the previous year. 2017, total trade between Georgia and the world reached 215 unique countries and territories. 90% of our counties have at least one company that is either importing or exporting, which is amazing. 1,396 Georgia companies received customized support from our trade team last year. And so what's fascinating about trade through our department is it is a small business piece of what we do. Coca-Cola doesn't need us, UPS doesn't need us, but that small company making aerospace parts in Vidalia, Georgia, absolutely needs help entering new markets overseas. So our trade team helps them with finding the right market for their goods, matchmaking with buyers, and then helping them navigate customs in those countries, because we see that a lot of times as companies are entering the export market. Customs rules and regulations are different in every country. And so our on-the-ground support from our international offices help them navigate customs, and we see that over and over and over. So our Rural Georgia Initiatives Division, which was created in 2018, and y'all know that is Deputy Commissioner Amy Carter. Amy has been fantastic. If you haven't seen her in your community yet, it's because you're not looking, because she is out all over the state. They've met with key stakeholders in more than 70 rural counties across the state, and they've worked seamlessly, I believe, with our partners, and that is Commissioner Black, as well as ABAC and David Bridges and University of Georgia. They have done a great job of creating these relationships and then helping these relationships enter and help communities across the state. Our tourism division, we all know tourism is a vital driver in this state, and we're about to see a week of that coming up. There's a great example. That little Super Bowl is going to be a huge investment into this state from people who are coming, and they're going to spend money, and then they're going to leave. That's good for all of us. But our tourism industry had a record-breaking year last year, $63 billion of impact, and they support 460,000 jobs across this state. One of the really neat things, and I don't know if y'all have seen it, but this December, Travel and Leisure magazine named Georgia one of the 50 best places to visit in the world. And so last night I was curious, I looked that up, I wanted to see who else was in there. There are countries that are named all over in these 50 best places. South Africa, Armenia was mentioned, and then the state of Georgia. And I think that's a testament to the quality of life that we have here, but it also goes to the marketing that our team has put together to really reach out and touch these travel writers that really have an impact on the people that come to this state. So let's see. How does that work? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that I had slides, but I'm going to fall back and I only have three. this is a quick highlight of some of the great projects FY19 to date. These are things that we've announced since July 1. And what you'll notice is they are truly all over the state. Checkmate Industries in Thomasville, Georgia, BioIQ in Cobb County, which was just announced last week, SK Innovation, which is the largest investment that we've ever had in the state at $1.67 billion, 2,000 jobs in Jackson County. And that's an amazing project because it's truly the future of the automotive industry. These guys are going to be making batteries for automobiles. I don't know if the European Union has put in place a drive to create all electric vehicles by 2030. SK is going to be making the battery that goes into Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen and likely BMW. So these guys are going to be on the forefront of the move into electric vehicles. So the commitment was 2,000 jobs, but their chairman of the company announced when he was with the governor here in the Capitol that it's actually going to be more like a $5 billion investment and more like 6,000 jobs over the long run if this continues the path that they believe. So I wanted to talk about film for a minute. And again, this is one of the very few times where I've been around politics my entire career, one of the very few times where you can point to a piece of public policy that was voted on by a legislature and signed by a governor that had the drastic impact that this piece of legislation has had. The tax credits for the film industry, when you passed the film industry tax credits in 2007, the impact of the film industry was about $240 million. 10 years later, that is $9.5 billion. And so I'm going to highlight one film in particular, Gemini Man, which has not even come out yet. It's a Will Smith movie that had an impact all over the state. Their spend in Georgia, they didn't even film the entire movie here. Their spend in Georgia was $26 million. They hired 400 Georgia crew members, Georgia cast and extras, people participating in the film, 215. Hardware, lumber, and supplies, that impacted that Ace Hardware or whether it's Home Depot, 1.289 million. Transportation and truck rental spend. You see these, there are trucking companies catering to the movie industry that have moved from LA to Georgia just because of the amount of spend that one movie has. Catering, other food, 452 million, or 452,000, it'd be great if it were a million. And then lodging, 25,000 room nights. You see what that impact has on a hotel. I mean, 25,000 room nights. But this is what I'm the most proud of. These are the cities that were either where filming took place, where companies are located. These are the cities that were impacted. Ludowici, Glenville, Hinesville. I mean, these are places that, when we talk about the film industry, you don't realize that impact that it is having all over the state. So Gemini Man is something that I think it is one film out of 455 productions that happened last year. But you see the impact that had on communities around the state. And once again, I get to say thanks to a legislature that had the foresight to create this policy and then to keep it in place. But again, I'll highlight one more time, $9.5 billion in economic impact last year. So then the arts. I wanted to say a little piece about the Georgia Council for the Arts, which is also under us as well. The creative communities in Georgia really add up to a large, it's more than just painting and drawing. It's, the creative communities are vast. It's 3.9% of our state's total economy, and that roughly supports about 135,000 jobs. And that's $9.5 billion in direct compensation, their wages. So these creative communities, and you think of SCAD, you think of Georgia Tech, you think of art schools, but these are the kids that are in classrooms all across the state that are learning to think with their right brain. And so I met with a company yesterday in New York BlackRock Financial. And this is one of the largest investment companies in the world. One of the things that they are extremely excited about is tapping into Georgia's creative economies for workforce, because these kids see the world just in a little different perspective. They're not looking just for business students. They're not looking for finance students. They want to partner with SCAD. They want to partner with Georgia Tech to get computer programmers, to get designers, all as part of this a workforce that really spans the spectrum. It's one thing that makes this state unique is that we have focused on growing our workforce across the spectrum. And so companies like BlackRock, who are looking not only for the best and the brightest out of Georgia Tech's finance department and UGA's business school, they also want kids who grow up with an art background. So I don't want you guys to forget that. That was very insightful of the governor and the legislature to move the Georgia Council for the Arts and what they do into economic development. I think it's a great partnership. But of course, they have an impact across the state too, and I want to thank Chairman Hill and Representative Houston for their support of the Vibrant Communities grants. These Vibrant Communities grants are making a difference all across the state and really target rural Georgia, places where $5,000 can make a difference in order to bring a school bus full of kids from Franklin County, Georgia, to go to the High Museum or go to the Atlanta Symphony. Those things make a difference in the life of kids, and I really appreciate that you guys have continued to support that grant. So last, I'm going to leave you with a video, and y'all know that as I've talked to you over the last few years, we've made a real effort to update our marketing materials and our videos to really show Georgia. We have taken an integrated approach to economic development, and we want our marketing materials to show that as well. So this video combines all of our divisions, and we leveraged the Georgia artists, the Quiet Hounds, right out of Athens, to give the theme music for the video. But we're really proud of it. I'll take questions after the video, but thank you again for your support. Let's see, is it going to work? You know, audio-visual is always a challenge. While Bert works on that, I'm happy to take questions.
Well,
I don't know if it's going to work, y'all.
Computers.
It's on our website. I'd love for you to go there.
Good recovery, good recovery. All right, Senator Lucas.
Commissioner, as we try to develop Georgia and economics around the state of Georgia, the question I have y'all thought about doing something with fishing tournaments? The reason I ask that, Clay County, Fort Gaines, Georgia, there's no easy way to get to it, but it's on Lake Eufaula.
Right.
We got a big state park, and I mean a beautiful park with a golf course and everything. We're not doing anything with it, but on the other side of the river is Eufaula, Alabama, and they're doing fishing tournaments and everything, and people are going over there, staying in those cabins and things. Is there any way to look at that part of Georgia? Fort Gaines is almost a retirement community now, but at the same time, the amenities and those kind of things of developing that particular part of southwest Georgia, which has all kind of, I would say, economic problems as well as health problems. And in being able to develop that part of Georgia would to me, entice folks and businesses to move when you have those kind of things going.
Senator Lucas, thank you for the question. You're absolutely right. There are parts of Georgia as I said, that are tougher to get to. And that's a great example. You know, we have fantastic state parks in this state, some of the most beautiful places in the world. And we've done, our team in tourism has done a lot of work with our friends at DNR to cross-market our parks. And the fishing piece is part of that. As you remember, I was in Governor Perdue's office at the time when we had Go Fish Georgia, and that was a big part of that effort was trying to attract some of these tournaments to parts of the state that maybe aren't seeing as much economic development. I know for a fact that our tourism team continues to work with DNR to promote that as an attraction, but that does highlight the fact that some of these communities, tourism is going to have a tremendous impact, and that is what could lead the way to other development. I think that we have a product development team in our office that their job is to go into communities and help the communities identify their product, what makes them unique, what makes them easy to sell, what fits into what tourists are looking for today. And they spend a lot of time going around rural Georgia, and they produce an amazing packet for these communities that gives them a roadmap on what is important in those communities and what they can then turn around and sell. I don't know if they've been down there, but I would love to put them in touch with Clay County.
Well, you know, I don't represent that part of Georgia, but
Right.
traveling, when you look at the community, I went down there because of health problems, dealing with a community, but at the same time, the state has invested money. We got a beautiful park,
Right.
golf course, across the state line, which is across that bridge and over to Eufaula, Alabama. They got fishing tournaments, their cabins, their park is full, but yet we on the Georgia side with a big old place, and nobody's going. And so I would say, and I would ask you and your department to look at trying to develop that part of the state. There are plenty of communities around it, but there's no easy way to get there.
Right.
But when you get there, they have some things to offer.
Senator Lucas, that's a great suggestion, and I'll take that back to our product development team and see if they've participated there.
Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Pat. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How did our music legislation turn out as far as economic development? The legislation we passed last session.
So the music tax credit, which you all passed last year, as we all know, in order to market and promote tax legislation, that takes a little while to see a return. And so the first year after rules and regs were put in place, which then, that took a few months off of it, we have seen applications, but we haven't seen anybody actually leverage it yet.
Right. I've been talking to some of the music folks over the summer, and there's one group that's interested in tour origination.
Great.
I'd like to talk to you about that sometime.
Okay.
I mean, it's a good concept. It's only one in Michigan on the east side of the United States. So we'll talk.
That's terrific.
Representative Stovall.
Thank you. I'm over here.
There you are.
I definitely am in support as a commissioner on the Georgia Council for the Arts for making sure that money is in the budget to be able to help with those grants. And I've been on several tours over the past years to see how important and how impactful those grants have been for the various communities around the state of Georgia. And I also look forward to your team visiting Clayton County this year in reference to, we talked about it with the farmers market project and some more things in Clayton County to help boost our tourism.
Great. Thank you, Representative Sowell. Appreciate your service on the Council for the Arts Board.
Representative Henson.
Over here.
There you are.
Thank you, and thanks for all that you've been doing. I've been dealing with economic development since I first came to Georgia, which has been nearly 40 years now. But when we put the tax credits in, it saved Kofa Brothers, which is a small independent hardware place in Tucker, which will now celebrate its 100th
That's
anniversary
great.
this year.
They're also in Athens. That's where I used to get my Christmas tree growing up.
You're right. It's on Mitchell Bridge Road,
That's
isn't
right.
it? Yeah. The other thing that I want to bring up is the development of South DeKalb. We seem to bring many businesses in. South DeKalb's got a lot of land. It's got good access. It's close enough to the airport, but we don't get the jobs. I don't know if we can bring in more of the music jobs, if that's a good location, or more businesses. We also have a technical school because they're going to be keeping DeKalb or Georgia Tech down, the technical, which Piedmont Technical, I'm sorry, it keeps changing names. They're going to be keeping that in South DeKalb, and in a lot of cases, you can bring in businesses where you have your technical schools training a lot of the folks for the specific businesses. But I really feel that South DeKalb's been left out in terms of looking at it for bringing businesses, and I really would like to encourage you to, and your team to be doing that over the next year.
Thank you.
And to finalize, I just want to thank you for everything, the great job that y'all doing.
Thank you. And I love your story because you chose Georgia too. So that's you can definitely help us bring business because you made that decision to come here.
What brought me to Georgia was the hospitality industry. I worked with the Sheraton Hotels with a group and came aboard and was personnel director and just stayed involved with the whole hospitality and tourism industry.
Great.
Thank
President
you.
Hinson, I would say in relation to DeKalb County, Michael Thurman has been great to work with, and he's really, I think, helping bring, coalesce the county. You know, one of the things that we really have to, you know, when you're working with companies and they're looking for places to go, they want everybody speaking on the same page. And I would say Michael Thurman has done a good job of getting everybody in the room, and he's really helped us as we've been bringing companies to look at land in South DeKalb. So thank you.
And to wrap up the questions, Representative Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. I'm not sure if we're doing very much in this area, but it's food for thought. Could we look at education as an exportable product? Other countries like England and Switzerland have great schools, and people from all over the world go there, and we have great schools here. And I'm not talking about our flagship universities.
Right,
they remain to be for our Georgia citizens. But I'm talking about our regional schools, our private schools, our technical colleges, where we still have seats available. What can we do to promote maybe education as an exportable commodity? Because students create jobs. I think the number is either for every 2 or 3 students, there's a job created in the community. And so I just wanted to mention that and get your thoughts.
No, that's really an interesting discussion because I've had this conversation with Chancellor Wrigley in the past. You know, we don't need to help the Georgia Techs or the UGAs, or you know, they're doing a great job attracting international students by themselves, and we all know the benefit of bringing international students in. You know, our building is on the Georgia Tech campus, and we see that every day there. So there is a real asset, I think, and a real untapped asset is marketing as a state. It's almost like our trade team, you know, helps Georgia companies enter new markets. It would be kind of trade of education, and we would be marketing for students overseas. So Chancellor Wrigley has gone on missions with us, and we've had this discussion, and we've set up partnerships with them with universities in China. We've worked together to, which you know, so that there is an exchange. But this is a bigger discussion, and I'd love to have it with you. The one piece that we would have to address, and that's out of our hands, is the immigration piece. That once you train these students, then they have to turn around and go back to another country, unless their home country, unless they get a job. So that's a little out of our hands, but I'd love to continue to have that discussion with you.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut the questions off at this point in order to keep us on our timeline for the governor's attendance here in a little bit. Commissioner, thank you, and thank you to the agency for what y'all do and continue to do to grow our great state and provide jobs for those that live here. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it. Thank y'all.
Our next presenter is Mr. Griff Lynch. He's the director of the Georgia Ports Authority. And Griff, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Lee.
Okay, Mr. Director, thank you for being with us. If everyone would Mr. Director, again, thank you for being with us, and the floor and the podium is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing the ports to be here today. Chairman Hill and Chairman England, we greatly appreciate this opportunity afforded to us and members of the committee. Before I begin, I just want to say I see Commissioner Wilson here speaking. I want to thank Pat for all the support that they give the ports and everything that they've done to help us be successful. Well, today I'm just going to talk to you very briefly about how the ports are performing and where we're at right now. The good news is for all of you, we have nothing to ask for. We're a very simple presentation, but we'll save that for next year. That was a joke. So if you look at the Georgia ports, one of the things that one of our key missions is we pride ourselves on being an economic engine for the state. And while we have about 1,300 folks that work for us directly, we touch so many more. And every several years we have the Terry College School of Business do a study for us, economic impact study. These are the results of that study from this past year. 440,000 jobs impacted, or up 19 to 20%, and you can see the numbers that flow from there. So something that we recognize who we are, what we are, and that's something that we continue to try to drive throughout the state. And I stole this fact from GDED as well. This is really a component of their mission, and last year alone, there were 29 port projects representing $1 billion of investment in the state, all port related, and you can see the jobs associated with that, almost 5,000 jobs. So a great story to tell. Something that we're very focused on, it's not, we hear today Atlanta and Savannah and Brunswick and so forth, that those are key locations for us, but for many years now we have been very focused on the entire state. And within that study that we have done by Georgia, the University of Georgia, we look at every single county, what the impact is of that county. And we picked two random locations. I don't know why we picked them, but I'm going to share them with you. The first one was Barrow County. Now, again, that's a joke. Random location. But you can see, you know, we have this information for every location. So if you would like to know the area that you represent, what the impact is, the Georgia ports, what your tie is, what companies are doing business, let us know. Lee, who's sitting with me right here, can feed that information to you. Very shortly, we are developing a new website, and we will be posting that information so anyone can pull down that information. And we did pick another county as well, Tatnall. We wanted to make sure we covered it fairly, gave equal opportunity. And then we have Schumann Produce as an example in Tatnall. John Schumann is actually on the Georgia Ports Board, a farmer out in Tatnall County. But we represent, you know, the big thing there is the onions coming through the ports, imported, during the off season. So we're always excited to have that type of business. So who are the ports and what do we do? For those that are not familiar with us, we have operations, significant operations in Brunswick as well as Savannah. In Brunswick, Georgia, one of our key pillars is automobiles. And we handled 600,000 automobiles last year. We were up 1.7%, really a small number, relatively speaking, but if you look at it over 5 years, it's a faster growing segment of our business. And I think this year, already this year, halfway through the fiscal year, we're up about 6 or 7%. So things are going very, very well there. We handle all manufacturers, Kia, Hyundai, Mercedes, BMW, the list goes on and on, Toyota. So we're very proud of that. We have 1,800 acres, 500 acres left to develop. We're number 2 in North America as far as throughput of autos. And we hope in the next 5 to 10 years to be number 1. There's no reason why we can't do that together, especially when you think about companies like Kia starting new lines this year. In March of this year, Kia will start exporting a new automobile called the Telluride. So excited to have that. On the container side, which is a much larger portion of our business, really the flagship facility. When you think about Georgia Port's revenues, the containers represent about 90% of everything that we do. We handled 4.35 million TEUs last year. A TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit, so just a standard metric that we use. 34 million tons of cargo in containers alone. If you look at everything that we do, it was about 37 million tons. So the number 4 container terminal in the country, the largest single container terminal in the Western Hemisphere as far as space goes. And the other thing that we'd like to point out here, we don't have the stat, but rail is the fastest growing segment of our business. We handled 476,000 rail containers last year. And I'll be talking in a little bit about what we're doing to grow our rail capacity, because this is not going to stop. And that there's several reasons for that, which we'll touch base on. Every other year, the Georgia Ports Authority formulates and comes together as a team. We bring experts in, economists, and we put together a 10-year strategy for the ports. And we look at what's growing, what's not, where do we need to be that we're not, and so forth. This chart represents what we project is the growth for the Georgia ports in the coming 10 years. The numbers may not mean a lot to you, but at the end of the day, we're talking about 3.7% growth on average is our projection. The Georgia ports, I failed to mention, is the fastest growing port over the last 10 years in North America. And what this chart is telling us is that today we handle about 4 million TEUs, but come 2028, we're going to be in excess of 6 million. So we need the ability to handle 8 million TEUs because it's not a linear thing. There's peaks and valleys. So during Christmas time, in preparing for that, the cargo swells up in the months of September and October. And this is the way our business runs. But that's a major challenge. And there is not one terminal in the Western Hemisphere that can handle that amount of cargo in one location. But we can with the right investments. So that's what we'll talk about. 8 million TEUs, so we will invest $2.5 billion in the ports over the next 10 years. That $2.5 billion will primarily come from our cash flow at the port. We are so proud to be part of the state. We get to represent the state and manage the assets owned by the state, but we run it as though all the cash flow that we earn basically goes back into the business, buying ship-to-shore cranes. They're $15 million apiece, building new berths, developing land for autos, putting new rail terminals in other parts of the state. So that's where the $2.5 billion will go. So our goal, if you were at the State of the Port, and I think some of you were, is 8 million TEUs. That's where we want to be capacity-wise by 2028. We want to thank you. The SHEP project, the Savannah Harbor Expansion Program, has been ongoing for over 20 years now. We are now, we'll say, 50% complete. That would not have happened without the support of many of you in this room. The state of Georgia stepped up to the plate and put up $300 million to get the project started. It's a $1 billion project, and the feds have to provide the rest of that. So when you look at that, we only have $200 million to go. What we are very encouraged by is that last year, for the first time in the life of this project, we received all the funds requested from the federal government, $100 million. So we really need 2 more slugs of $100 million, and this project is done. Where do we stand? By the way, if you don't know it, this is a stat we've put out many over the airwaves for years now, but it's the highest rated project in North America as it relates to deep water projects. So 7.3 to 1 is the benefit to cost ratio. That just means for every dollar invested, $7.3 go back to really the consumer's pockets. So that translates to $282 million a year. So in just a couple of years, this project is paid off. 50% complete, will be done in 2021. We are now waiting for some things to be tested, and then probably this year we will start the inner harbor. And when that inner harbor is complete, we are complete. What does complete mean? We are 42 foot at mean low water, deep water today. We will be 47 foot at mean low water when this project is completed in 2021. Why that's so important is ships are getting bigger. They require more draft, and today the large vessels that come to Savannah cannot be fully loaded because we don't have enough water. When we have 47 feet, they will be able to be completely loaded. We recognize that it's not just about the ports. There are many stakeholders here who help us be successful, and one of those, I mentioned GDED, but the other I would say is GDOT. And we're working very closely with Commissioner McMurray and his team to ensure that we have the right infrastructure. I was just in Macon this morning and seeing the 75 improvements, but here locally in Savannah, those 2 purple lines, the Jimmy DeLoach project and the Brampton Road, are 2 great examples of us formulating a beltway into our facility. This is not something that exists in many places. I think you can hear my accent. I'm from New York, and we don't have traffic flow like this in New York, and we're very proud of the infrastructure that we have around the facilities that make us successful. A lot of folks want to know about our inland ports. When we talk about rural Georgia, there are locations that cannot be adequately serviced by roads and by trucks. One of those is in Murray County. There's a lot of, it's a tier 1 county, and several years ago the Georgia ports decided with our board to invest in building a new inland port, the Appalachian Regional Port. We opened that this summer, and it is like a startup. It's a new company, so we have to get people to change their supply chains to start using rail from Savannah all the way to the ARP, and you can see this picture where that is. It's been really exciting. It's been a slow startup, but we're happy and pleased to say we're now handling cargo every week. And what that does, it's 350 miles each way. So that's removing trucks off the road and providing opportunities in a rural county like Murray County. We actually hired 11 folks to get this place started and up and running. All 11 people, actually, excuse me, 10 of those people came from Murray County. We hired them, brought them down to Savannah, trained them over the last year, and then sent them back for the opening. So, great success story. We're looking to do that in other locations. Northeast Georgia, different situation than Northwest Georgia. Northeast is very busy. There's a lot of distribution facilities. Our customers are begging us to do this. It makes a lot of sense. The other location that we have in mind is West Point, Georgia, or LaGrange, Georgia, and that's because Kia is located there, and they're having some challenges getting cargo to that location, and so we'll probably do something like to help them and help facilitate cargo. But essentially, we're trying to go beyond our gates, beyond the Georgia ports gates, and move our gates into the backyard of our customers. That's what this is all about. And I think, it's a beautiful story because we're creating jobs outside of Savannah and Brunswick, and we're going to improve on what the 440,000 jobs we just shared with you. So, great story. And I mentioned rail, the growth of rail. If we're going to have these inland ports, we have to have the ability to handle rail on our terminal. Today, we can handle about 500,000 containers a year on rail. That's an estimate. When the mega rail is completed, it's a $200 million project from the Georgia Ports Authority cash flow and $44 million from a grant, a fast lane grant. When it's completed, we'll have the capacity to handle up to 1 million containers on rail. What you see here and what I'm going to share with you is actually the single largest on-terminal rail yard in the Western Hemisphere. So this is a big deal. We're building right now 100,000 feet of rail, 20 miles of rail on the facility. It's about 50% complete. We will open the first phase of this later this year, and the second phase in 2020 will finalize the facility. So really excited about this. This is a game changer for us and helps us for the future. What does it help us do? It'll help us handle the future vessels. A lot of you have come to the ports and seen the big ships, and this is actually a really big ship, the 14,000 TEU ship. If you go back just a couple of years, when I started my career 30 years ago, the largest ship on the water was 3,500 TEUs, okay, just to put it in perspective. So here we are 30 years later, and we're at 14,000, and many people thought when these ships were built, they would be the largest. Well, they're not the largest. They're the largest that are coming to North America today, both the West Coast and East Coast. The largest, and I'm just going to, we have a graphic that usually kind of morphs, but it won't work here, so I'm going to do this for you a couple times to give you the effect, the full effect. And I mean, just take, that ship actually has been built. There are a lot of those, and they're running from Europe to Asia. They're 22,000 plus TEUs. When we look at our 10-year strategy, we have to think about what are the things that are going to happen that may not be happening today. And one of those things is this vessel will call North America eventually. The ports that win the competition battle for cargo are going to be the ports that can handle the largest ships. So this is our, at the end of the day, our focus, to make sure we can facilitate a vessel of this size. And so in order to do that, we are building our facilities, the rail, the berth, the cranes, and we'll take care of that part. But we are going to need some help. I said I wasn't asking for anything, and I told you a half-truth, because eventually we will have to ask for something, and that's help with building a new bridge. Not now. Today, what we're doing about this is we've just started a program with GDOT to formulate a scoping document to look at alternatives to the Talmadge Bridge. Believe it or not, the existing Talmadge Bridge with an air draft from the water to the underside of the bridge is 196 feet. That's not enough. New York, New Jersey just raised a bridge for $1.6 billion. It wouldn't cost that much for us. They did that, and they raised it to 215 feet to handle vessels like this. So they will kind of govern what happens on the East Coast. We need to match them or even exceed them slightly. So we're working with the Georgia Department of Transportation. A lot of folks ask, is a tunnel possible? We don't care if it's a tunnel or a bridge, and that's what the scoping document will figure out for us. They'll put the right engineers, the right design folks on it, and they'll do that. Over the next 10 years, this is what we're looking for. And there are a lot of, and it's the right question. People say, but the Talmadge Bridge is so young. I mean, it hasn't lived its full life. But what's interesting about this slide is the first Talmadge Bridge lasted for 38 years. The air draft was 136 feet. If this bridge was replaced in 2028, it will be 37 years old. So it'll be just about the same age as the previous bridge. And obviously, we need to go from 196 to 215. So this is more of an information gathering. We're letting you know this is something we're looking at. We'll be talking about it in years to come, not next year necessarily, but it's something that has to happen. This is probably about $1 billion cost. So it's definitely a significant thing. We recognize that, but we wanted to let you know now. If you would like the ports to continue to be what the ports are, this is something we have to figure out. With that being said, I'd like to say thank you again for all of the support that you have given us. And for those folks that are new to the Appropriations Committee, you're welcome to come down to the ports anytime. We love to provide tours. Lee especially loves to do tours, and we welcome you. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Director. And I need to talk to you offline about an inland port in Auburn to help with Hamrick Furniture. Those 6 or 8 TEUs that you had on there, I know that they're looking to expand pretty quickly, and we're right there on the railroad with that, so shouldn't be an issue.
Very good.
Any questions from the committee? Don't appear to have any, so we appreciate you coming, and you know, we can always go back to a drawbridge, I guess, on the river if we need to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank y'all. Thank you for what you do. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, please remain seated. We are expecting the governor here in just a little bit. So if you would, please remain in your seat so when he arrives, we can bring him in and let him speak. And he'll be wrapping us up today with his comments. Oh, and also would like to welcome James Salzer with the AJC that actually decided to get out from in front of a monitor watching the hearings and actually come in person and do his job. We'll see how well he does his job later, I guess. Mr. Doorkeeper, do you have an announcement? Please show the governor into the podium. Well, Governor, after multiple introductions as you arrived, the problem is I think Al Williams thought all that was for him, but I'm not sure. But in all seriousness, thank you for being with us. I know that it's been a busy few days for you, and our great state is getting ready to host the world here in a few days, and know that y'all were in New York yesterday, signifying kind of the beginning of those festivities, and y'all represented us well up there. And so welcome to the appropriations joint hearings, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and other folks that are in the room, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much for that kind welcome. I apologize for being late with Representative Williams and Smyrie and Jackson had me cornered outside trying to get the inside track on my remarks today, so I apologize for being late. But it's an honor to be with you today, and I want to thank the chairs for accommodating my schedule. I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday. As Chairman England said, we were in New York ringing the bell at the stock market, which is pretty neat. We had Mayor Bottoms was there, and the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor were there. It was a great delegation from Georgia getting ready for this great Super Bowl we're going to have. So we had a strong showing up there. It was really good. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about my amended 19 budget and the big 2020 budget. Having sat here previously in this room as a legislator, I understand what you guys are going through. I also understand I may be between you and lunch, so I'll try to be very brief. As you all know, I started my career in construction, and throughout 30 years in the private sector, I've built homes, I've built businesses, and obviously Marty and I have built a great family, and I know that you need a solid foundation before you can start building. And thankfully, because of Governor Sonny Perdue and Nathan Deal and your work, this legislature, that's exactly what we have in Georgia, and I'm very proud of that, and I thank you all for that. Today is really a blueprint that I wanted to lay out, just some highlights of our construction project. And in the years to come, I believe that we can stand together and we can build a safer, stronger state. First of all, I want to thank you all for your quick response in regards to Hurricane Michael. I appreciate the governor's leadership on that, Governor Deal, and certainly appreciate your bipartisan support for the things that were done. I want to thank you for that. It has helped mitigate further losses and allow our storm victims to begin rebuilding their lives. We all know that there's still a tremendous amount that we need to do and will have to do over, I'm sure, will probably be the next decade, potentially even more. And I want to let you know that my administration stands ready to work with you, along with our federal, state, and local partners to continue to monitor the recovery process and identify, anything that we can be helpful in regards to that. So just please know that we'll be ready to work with you on that. Also, you all know, and I've heard it many times, that to attract high-quality jobs in our state, we must have a skilled workforce to be ready for them. We need a solid K-12 education system that prepares our students to pursue higher education opportunities in our university, in our technical college systems, and to be able to gain the skills that they need for the jobs of not only today, but more importantly, the jobs of tomorrow. And investing in our workforce means investing in those who educate, inspire, and help lead our students each and every day in the classroom. As I've said many times, and I know you all have heard this more than once, but 44% of our teachers are leaving the profession within the first 5 years. And to recruit and retain the best and brightest in our schools, we've got to do several things. Number one, we need to remove heavy burdens in the classroom. And number two, we've got to keep teacher pay competitive. As you all know, in the 2020 budget, I proposed a $3,000 permanent salary increase for certified Georgia teachers. This is the largest pay increase in Georgia history and serves as a sizable down payment to my ultimate promise of raising teacher pay $5,000. We also felt like it was very important to include a 2% merit increase for all other state employees. These hard-working Georgians, and I know firsthand, are playing a vital role in serving Georgia's families and crafting Georgia's future, and we must continue to reward their efforts and remain competitive in the marketplace. However, for our teachers and students to succeed in the classroom, they first and foremost they need to feel secure in their learning environment. Therefore, in the amended 2019 budget, we are prioritizing school safety by including $69 million in one-time funds that will go to represent a $30,000 grant in all 2,294 public schools in our state to implement school security priorities as determined by complete local control, by the local boards, administrators, teachers, and parents, because every school is different. The neighborhoods that they're in are different. The parts of state that they're in are different, and we need to leave it up to the locals to decide what is the best way in their particular school to make their students and their teachers and administrators not only feel safe, but be safe. And so I'm very excited about that. As a father of 3 teenage daughters, nothing is more important than me than the safety of these 3 girls that we have. And I know every parent here and across our state feels the same way about their children. We've seen too many stories of school violence as a result of mental illness. Loss of that could possibly have been prevented by identifying those in crisis and providing them a rapid intervention service. In order to address mental health issues that often lead to school violence, in the 2019 amended budget, we've included $8.4 million in additional funding for the successful APACS program, which will provide support counselors for mental health services in Georgia high schools. These professionals will engage with struggling students and, more importantly, provide them critical resources to prevent disruptive and aggressive behavior. Additionally, in the 2020 budget, we've included $28.1 million for behavioral health services to provide treatment and recovery opportunities for Georgians with mental health issues and addiction. It also includes $4.3 million to further expand accountability courts to divert nonviolent offenders from incarceration, saving taxpayer dollars and providing services and rehabilitation opportunities to prevent recidivism and transform lives. And I know you all have worked very closely over the last several years in that regard, and we want to continue those efforts. Each of these programs plays a vital role in treating mental illness before a tragedy occurs. These programs keep our citizens safe and reduce the burden on local law enforcement agencies, letting them focus on fighting violent crime and removing violent offenders, including dangerous gang members from our streets. The Georgia Gang Investigators Association recently estimated that there are over 71,000 validated gang affiliates and over 1,500 suspected gang networks in our state. To combat this rising threat to our state, this budget proposal includes $500,000 in initial funding to form a gang task force within the GBI. This highly qualified group of experienced law enforcement personnel and prosecutors will work with local district attorneys and law enforcement to stop and dismantle gangs. I've also instructed the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council to utilize existing resources to develop a criminal gang and criminal alien database that will allow the state to track and deport drug cartel kingpins who are terrorizing our community. The 1,500 gang networks operating in Georgia will be no match for this new unified network of federal, state, and local partners that we are building to target, undermine, and eradicate organized crime from our state. Finally, access to quality and affordable health care continues to be a central concern for our citizens, and it is a priority for this administration. As I mentioned in the State of the State address, today in Georgia, 79 counties have no OBGYN, 64 counties have no pediatrician, and 9 counties have no doctor at all. We must find innovative ways to expand health care access through innovation and competition. To that end, the amended 19 budget includes $1 million for the Department of Community of Health to pursue flexibility options for Georgia's Medicaid program to expand access without expanding a broken system. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present my vision for the future of our great state. Our Office and Planning Budget Director, Kelly Farr, has spoken with you all as well, and he is here today along with our Chief Financial Officer, Greg Dozier, Chief Operating Officer, Lori Smith, and Deputy Chief Operating Officer, Cody Whitlock. And I know that you all have a stamp to put on this budget as well, and all of us will be glad to answer your questions in the days ahead as you work to put your stamp on the budget, and we look forward to working with you through that process. Thank you, Chairman Hill and Chairman England, members of the committee, and you all for having us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Governor.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance the last 2 days. We are adjourned, and now the work begins.